what is the next technology? It reminds me of the very somewhat goal-oriented, sort of linear thinking that monotheist religions tend to have, which is, what's the next thing? What do you do when you get there? And it's kind of like, I think what's more important is the process. And so to me, I had a teacher who was teaching me meditation. He says, just don't think about elephants. And then of course you can't meditate, right? And I think that what's critical about what's happening right now is not necessarily what the next big technology is, but the fundamental way in which innovation has changed. And I think it's as important as science. The scientific method was such an important thing that it shook religion. I think the way that we are innovating in the post-internet days, which is really innovation, is happening on edges. It's about questioning authority and thinking for yourself rather than listening for authority. It's not about looking for the answer. It's not about knowing the answer. All of these things that Reed listed, in retrospect, they're obvious, but you couldn't, even Reed and I, when we invest, we don't know which ones are going to be successful. We bet. And the reason that we're able to place these bets is a bunch of different things. One is that the cost of failure has gone down so much that it's nearly zero. And so what you do is you place your bets and it costs more to think about and talk about stuff than to try stuff. And again, this has a lot to do with the way that innovation happens. We have this word called end-to-end principle. It's about don't try to mess with the architecture in the middle, keep it simple so that the edges, and David Weinberger has a phrase, small pieces loosely joined is really what the internet's about. It's not about the smartest people with the most resources in central R&D labs. I mean, that's still important, and when you want to figure out, look at atoms, you have to build humongous colliders and stuff like that. So there are certain things that require a lot of capital, but the place where I think the most opportunity is the low-cost innovation on the edges. And again, it's interesting because we're in an institution like Cambridge where in the old days the cost of disseminating information, the cost of congregating people like this was so high that we had to dish out this scarce resource to just the brightest people. Well, today we're streaming this on the internet, and I see it all over Twitter. We're able to give this information and interact with hundreds and thousands and millions of people. And when we go from a world of scarcity, where we had to centrally plan and control this very important scarce resource of education and research money, to a world where we can give it to everybody and everybody can be connected, that same gatekeeping method of authority that we have is now becoming the barrier. And the reason that Silicon Valley in many ways was successful is it doesn't have as much authority, it doesn't have as much, there's much more irreverence, and I think the thing that holds back a lot of countries like Japan, where everybody waits for the answer from authority, and they don't question authority, they don't think for themselves, they don't try stuff, and they're always looking for the answer. And so I think that, if I were to sort of, and again, I apologize that I'm going meta on everybody here, but I really do think that the idea of, it's a black box is another way of thinking about it. We scale society by creating black boxes upon which we build things. And typically in science, it costs a lot of money to open black boxes, so we didn't do it very often. Well, what's happened with the internet, and if you look at the way processes have been developing with agile software development and things like that, is that the engineers who are doing things are modifying the process, their methods by messing with the tools. Right? And each layer of the internet started out with the routers allowing hackers to break into mess with telecommunications, the software, and it's going up to these layers now. The thing is that the real innovation is happening when the practitioners are modifying the tools themselves. And I think one of the problems that we have is that we still have professionals playing and creating tools, and then we have practitioners like the journalists and the MBAs who don't understand how to open these black boxes. And we've separated the people who are thinking about business from the people who are creating the tools. And I think the big innovation that's happening is that the people who are thinking and owning business are able to modify the tools. And I think if you think about it, again, in the context of this school, is that the real success of Silicon Valley has also been mashing together the designers and business people and the technology people into one unit and putting it into one. And again, I think interdisciplinary is oversimplifying what is a much more fundamental thing, which is that everybody needs to understand the tools deeply enough that they can open the black box and innovate deeply rather than innovate on the surface. And so that innovation